Hello, and welcome to the Mobile UX Marathon, a series of weekly webinars on how to improve user experience and conversion rate on the mobile web. Today's webinar is about design sprints. Please share your questions with us on the UX Marathon website and later dial into the live stream to get your answers. The website also has more information about upcoming live streams, resources, and decks. You can find the link to the website in the video description. Before we get started, I wanted to introduce myself. My name is Emily Ferdinandi, and I am a mobile user experience specialist here at Google. I've been running design sprints here for about 2 years, and I'm excited to tell you more about them. Today, we're going to cover 3 main topics: sprint methodology, the sprint mindset, and how you can apply sprint methods to MWeb optimization. Join us on the live stream on May 21st so that you can hear about some design sprint case studies and we can have the Q&A. Starting off with sprint methodology. What is a design sprint? Essentially, it is a framework for answering critical business questions through design, prototyping, and testing ideas with users. We have something that we call a converge and diverge mindset. So we start first with understanding. We want to get all of the information that we can possible. We do this through things like lightning talks and ideation, hearing from experts. We then converge and we make decisions. We then diverge again to sketch and decide by thinking about as many possible solutions as we can, and then converge once we make decisions again. So it's this process of going wide and then bringing it back together through the understand, sketch, decide, prototype, and validate stages. There are a couple things that a design sprint is not that I wanted to point out. It's not a UX design review. It's not a brainstorm. It's not a place to complain or an extra long meeting or a time and place to close down ideas or direct thinking. It's really all about ideation, thinking about what's possible, and then bringing it to fruition. In order to have an effective sprint, the most important thing you need is the right sprint team. That consists of quite a few different people that we'll walk through. The first is the decider. That's going to be the SVP, the VP, whoever is going to make the decision on bringing the prototype live at the end of the day. After that, you need someone who knows the business. This can be the product owner or marketing, whoever that may be. Next, you need the creator. This is the person who's going to design the prototype, and that can be a designer or a UX engineer. Then a builder, so someone who can discuss the technical feasibility of what you decide during the sprint and then eventually develop it into creation. Last but not least, which is an optional sprint team member, is the customer expert. This can be someone from sales, someone who knows the ins and outs of the pain points of the product and can have that consumer perspective. And last but not least, you will have a sprint master or a facilitator who will guide you throughout the day. Typically, Google Ventures Design Sprint is a 5-day process. So on Monday, you unpack. This is one of those diverge moments where you unpack everything you know about your product, about what you are sprinting, and you plan for 5 user interviews to get even more information outside of what is available in your sprint team. This could involve bringing in experts from your team. Really, you're trying to get as much information as possible. On Tuesday, you are going to start sketching your idea. So you'll work to draw detailed solutions on paper, paper being the operative word here, since this is really about low fidelity prototypes and just getting all the ideas out there. Next, on Wednesday, you'll start the decision phase. So you'll have a lot of different solutions to choose from, and you'll narrow it down to what is the best and the most feasible that the team wants to move forward with. Thursday is when you get to be ridiculously productive. You'll spend hours in the flow prototyping in Sketch or InDesign, whatever you may use, what this prototype could look like when you want to bring it to market. And last but not least, Friday is for testing. This is where you'll show that prototype to real customers in one-on-one interviews, get their feedback, and see how you did. Now, not everybody has 5 days to give to a sprint, so that is okay. There are other options in different sizes, so to speak. So all you have to do is narrow down the scope of what you're trying to achieve. If you only have 1 to 2 days, you can really sprint a single feature or component, and you'll have lower fidelity deliverables. In 2 to 3 days, you can do a set of features and maybe even 2 user flows. If you have 4 to 5 days, you can really rethink an entire experience and create a full product vision. Sprints are absolutely wonderful and very effective, but there are some potential challenges that we wanted you to be aware of. First, it's a lot of work. As the facilitator or the sprint master, you can plan for about 5 to 10 hours of prep work before the sprint, and then between 1 to 5 days of sprinting, deciding how much scope you want to cover. Another challenge is getting the right people in the room, but this is absolutely essential. A lot of people are very busy and they may not be familiar with sprints, so they may not want to join. But it is really our job to convince them, to show them the value of it, because if we don't have all the necessary players present for the entire time, it's likely that the sprint won't be very effective. Third is time commitment. Again, people are too busy to focus on one project for 2 to 5 days, so you need to make the case to have them block the entire time and be present. Fourth, short-term thinking. So a lot of times we hear the quarter is already planned, there's no time to focus on the future. And this is really about thinking not what's happening right now, but how we can improve things in the future. Last is sprint resistance. Perhaps someone has tried a sprint before and it wasn't effective, so you might have to reconvince them why they need to try again. Moving on to the sprint mindset. I think it's really important to understand what makes a great design sprint. First, as we've talked about a little bit already, is stakeholder buy-in, getting all of the right folks into the room and committed to this project. The second, equally and very, very important piece of this is having a well-defined goal. You should go into the sprint knowing exactly what you are trying to achieve. You may not know the how yet, but you should know what you're working towards. Next is it's tightly run. Whether it's 1 day or 5 days, there's a lot of information, a lot of activities, a lot going on. And it's the sprint master's job to keep everyone on track, keep the time, and to keep the energy high. Last but not least is clear follow-up. You've already given 1 to 5 days, if not more, to this sprint project. So you want to make sure that what comes out of it is actually implemented. So there's a lot of follow-up that needs to happen to make sure that all of these ideas actually come to fruition. I wanted to talk a little bit about the exercises that can be done for each of these steps of the sprints that we talked about. So the first is understand, and this is the ideation inspiration phase. Often this includes lightning talks about topics that will inspire or educate those in the sprint room. You can discuss business goals, talk about technology constraints up front, do some user interviews, create a stakeholder map to understand who you'll need to influence in order to make this a reality, a competitive overview of who is doing really well in this space and who you can get inspiration from. And the last is an exercise called How Might We's, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Second is define. And here is where you go through the user journey, think about the user needs, define the success metrics, and perhaps do something like an experience strategy or an executive summary. Third is where we begin to diverge into sketch. So this is where you'll start doing a lot of paper drawings. We do something called Crazy Eights, and you can storyboard some of your ideas. This is where they start to take shape. Next, you'll decide, and decide will happen throughout the entire sprint day as we, again, converge and diverge. So this can include Zen voting, decision sliders. There's a lot of different activities. We use a lot of stickers in this phase to vote and to narrow down the decisions. After that, we have the prototype phase. So this can be either a physical prototype like a poster or a mock-up of a future website or a flow, again, using InVision Design or whatever designing system that you use. Next, you'll validate, and last. So this will be a validation with either people in your company or users that you bring in to go through the prototype that you've created and provide feedback to make sure that it's meeting the needs and the goals that you've set. I wanted to go a little bit more in depth into some of the activities that we do in design sprints that you might not be familiar with. So the first, as I mentioned, is called How Might We's. The goal of How Might We's is, instead of writing down just ideas, it's to frame it in this idea of open-ended and optimistic, so that you're looking for opportunities and challenges rather than getting bogged down by problems or jumping to solutions too soon. So how might We's work is that you grab a marker. This is essential that you want to use actually something with a larger tip, not a ballpoint pen. And this forces you to be more broad and not get too focused on the details. You'll grab a sticky, and once you are going through the inspiration phase, perhaps the lightning talks, whenever something is triggered in your mind as an idea, you write it down and you convert it into a question starting with how might we? So how might we remove the sign up flow for our website from 4 pages to 2 would be an example of a how might we. So at the end of the inspiration phase, at the end of the lightning talks, you should end up with a lot of different sticky notes that have a whole bunch of ideas that you are going to think about in the next stages. After that, there is user journey mapping. And the goal of the user journey mapping is to go through your experience in the shoes of your customer and identify the strengths and weaknesses of your current experience. Here is where you might identify some pain points and areas of improvement that you'll want to fix during the sprint. So you'll review your current user strategy and you'll write down all points of improvement on Post-its. You'll compare these to the how might we's from the previous exercise, and then you can start grouping them and creating a sort of high-level ideas of where you might focus your energy for the rest of the sprint. Crazy Eights is one of the sketching exercises, and this is to just get all the ideas out on paper. It doesn't matter if you are terrible at drawing, makes no difference. Everyone can participate in this. The goal is really to use this fast-paced method to get everyone focused and explore their own ideas before we start narrowing it down further. To do Crazy Eights, you take one 8x11 sheet of paper and you fold it into 8 little rectangles. Conveniently, they look about the size of a mobile phone. And you'll have 1 minute to sketch an idea into each rectangle. Ideally, you want to sketch 8 different ideas and not do a storyboard of the same idea multiple times. Really, you want to go for quantity here. You don't have to worry about making them pretty or perfect. They're just for yourself. And the point of having 8 is to try and get beyond an initial idea. Usually you'll go through 1, 2, or 3 fairly quickly. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 start to get a little bit harder, and it really forces you to think outside of the box and to explore some new ideas. Next, we have solution sketch. So after you've done the Crazy Eights, you'll go through a process of sharing and voting, and then you'll put a little bit more detail behind the winning ideas. So each person will select the best idea from the Crazy Eights exercise, and they will sketch out multiple states of that idea to give it a little bit more clarity. You can include words in this sketch to communicate a little bit better, and you can add a title that you'll use to reference it throughout the rest of the day. You'll end and throughout the process go through voting and sharing. So typically each person will have about 3 minutes to share their solution, and then everyone will be able to vote on average about 2 times for each idea that they want to pursue. You can vote for the same idea twice, you can vote for your own idea or someone else's. At the end of the voting, you'll look at where most of the sticky dots are, and those are the ideas that you're going to work on for prototyping in the afternoon. The goal here is to just come to a common consensus in a quick manner on the most important solutions to work on. So last, I wanted to talk a little bit about how you can apply these sprint methods to your website optimization. Oftentimes, your sprint will focus on one of the 3 main performance pillars, either attention, which is the landing page or the main page that your audience goes to, navigation, so how they get from that main page to a detail page or category page, and then lastly, the checkout flow, so the action that you want them to take. So this can involve making sure that when someone lands on your site, you have the right calls to action, the right value proposition, the look and feel of the website is clean, coherent, and easy for the user to explore. Navigation can mean how do they explore further? So how do they find things on your site? How do they get from point A to point B and navigate in an easy way? And lastly is the checkout flow. So if your lead generation is the flow optimized to have seamless keyboard entry, things like that, is making it easy for them to get to that final checkout point where they're trying to leave. On average, we see improving any of these 3 performance pillars can greatly increase conversion rate. A couple of stats to share with you. 61% of users expect brands to tailor their experiences based on preferences. Almost 50% prefer to use their smartphone in the entire purchase process, not just in the research phase. And almost 30% of cart abandonments are due to too long and complicated checkout processes. What this means is that working on your mobile website, whether it's from the beginning when they land, navigating throughout, or eventually converting, can have a really meaningful impact on your bottom line and your conversion rate. So that is it. That's all we have for you today. I wanted to leave you with a few resources in case you're interested in learning more about design sprints. You can check out the Google Ventures Design Sprint materials at gv.com/sprint. They have design sprint kits with the Think with Google site, so you can run a design sprint on your own if you're interested. You can watch some videos on YouTube that we've listed here, and you can also read the book Sprint, which is wonderful and goes through everything that we discussed here in more detail. So please join us for the live stream on May 21st. Make sure you put your questions online so that we can answer them during the live stream, and we'll also share some new case studies on folks that have run design sprints and the impact that they saw for their business. So thank you very much for your time, and enjoy the rest of your Mobile UX Marathon.